I have been working on this overhaul, I guess you could call it, to my bandsaw for the past, well, this is day 4, actually. So it's quite involved, and it's consuming quite a lot of time. It's not that I'm out here from, 7 in the morning until 7 at night working on this, but it's still taking that many days because I've got to do so much, let epoxy dry. Like yesterday, I had to let silicone dry on the wheels here. And the time that I'm not working on it, I'm thinking about it. So it's all the same. So if I have like 4 hours of work time, I might have 4 hours of thinking about it time too, when you add it all up with the time in between. Like I'll be standing there grilling a steak and I'll be thinking about how I'm going to make this part up here. So it all counts to the thing. Anyway, this video is about ideas. I get asked once in a while whether, where the ideas come from or whether I'm going to run out of ideas. The short answer to where I get them from is I just look around at the things that I need or the things that I want, and I just do them. I might think of something that's interesting, even though they all are making something. They seem to be kind of disjointed. Like this week I'm working on my bandsaw. Next week I might be working on building the new table saw. A few days ago I made a knife out of a ceramic tile. Before that I made a bowling ball out of spalted maple to turn on the lathe stand that I made before that. It's almost like a cascade of things. Like if you do one thing, then it'll make you think of another thing, and so on and so forth. And as for new ideas, I don't think I'm going to run out of them. It's just that more and more now, the new ideas have already been done. Like that was the advantage of coming into this when it was still fairly new. I could do things that were not as common, therefore get a little bit of popularity from that. But these days it's getting harder and harder to do that. The point is that even if you're doing the same project that, 4 or 5 or 10 or 50 people even have done it already, is that you do something that's different, and not just different for the sake of difference. I try to think of ways to improve things. Now I take this bandsaw here as an example. I started building this right after you started building yours, and that's what inspired me to do it. I said, if that guy can make a bandsaw, damn it, I can too. So I started building this, and I had a kind of an interesting idea for it, and that was to make the tension adjustment on the bottom wheel down here. This stays stationary as far as height goes. It just tilts, and I thought the advantage of that would be that it would remove some of the complexity away from this. And I thought that, the weight of the mechanism, say the motor and everything that's down there already, would help to tension the blade. And then after I had it done, I thought that maybe this is a little bit more complex than it needs to be. And I thought maybe I wouldn't do it again if I were to do this over again. But now that I'm looking at it again, I think if I was to make another bandsaw, this is exactly the way I would do it. I would make the bottom wheel lift and lower to tension the blade, and I would, make this so it just tilts to adjust the tracking. Another comment I get, well, fairly often anyway, is if I get any useful suggestions from the viewers. And it doesn't happen very often, but occasionally you will. Of course, reading all the comments is helpful because then you'll be able to see them. A good example is my bandsaw blade storage over here. A viewer suggested that I use the window frame opening to put them in. This would not have occurred to me. I don't think so anyway, but here they are inside this opening. These blades are 120 inches long, and coiling them up is a pain, and it's something I don't want to do. So they fit in here nicely, and they use up space that otherwise is not being used. So I thought that was a good idea. That is a very rare thing though. For the most part, I don't know how to put this delicately, but the comparison that I would make is that, say 2 adults are talking and there's a child standing there listening to you, and they make a suggestion pertaining to what you're talking about. And I'm not saying that to insult anybody, but of course people will be insulted anyway because that's just the way it goes. The fact is that unless you are deep into this and look at all of the parameters, I guess you could say, you're not going to be able to make an informed suggestion on how to do things differently or make changes. Like I said, that's not all the time. Occasionally you will get a suggestion that'll make you think about alternate ways of doing things, but that's very rare. You have to have somebody that's well versed in this kind of thing, has done this kind of work before. Either that or is paying really close attention and has a high degree of, say, mechanical aptitude to be able to process all the different factors involved with doing something. I'll take this bandsaw, for example, here. I'm sure when I post a video on changing this thing up here, I'll get some suggestions about how I could have done it differently. Or maybe I won't. Who knows? Depends on if anybody watches the video. When I started to do this, I had two major choices to make. I could either make the wheel spin on its own, or I could make the wheel spin with the shaft and have the bearings out here. I chose to do it this way because I thought that it was the better way of doing it. I really didn't have a lot of space on the front here to do anything, so I could put it all out back here. Sure, it's sticking out the back there. Sure, it kind of looks, I don't know, if it looks bad, who cares? It's just a bandsaw, but it's a more robust solution to the problem I was having, or at least I think it is. But the critical thing that the casual viewer would maybe miss about this is how this has to tilt and what you have to do to make that happen and still stay in line with the wheel down below. So that's the kind of thing that you would have to keep in mind while you're building something like this. Tendency to focus on one part only and ignore the other part, get to that later, but I try to keep all that stuff in mind when I'm doing it. So what does all that have to do with ideas? Well, the way I did this here is an idea, and it's something that, you know, you're not going to see in another video because it's my idea, it's my way of doing this. And that on its own would be helpful to someone that wants to not only build a bandsaw, but is constructing some other thing. They'll maybe get them to think about alternate ways to do things and not just go with the first, you know, thing that pops into their heads.